There is an ongoing back and forth argument, especially among my younger peers versus us Gen Xers, about the benefits of owning versus renting. Now, I realize in this particular stage in time in America, you don't have the option. Many of us do not have the option to pick and choose anymore. And those who have chose to purchase a home are sometimes regretting it if they are under a certain age. Let me tell you why that's just not a business. You have to own a home. You have to own your shelter. If you have any chance of building not only generational wealth, but stemming some of this bleeding that you're doing every month. I'm going to tell you why I am so biased on this issue right here, right now on the Ujamaa Network. Let's go. I was going to do a long, drawn out comparison over homeownership and renting. People make fun of this issue, especially people who have done both. And, those people who champion renting over homeownership, I really think they're doing you a disservice. And we're going to talk about those five or so points they always seem to come back at. And it just doesn't make any sense. Not to me. I just don't get how some of these talking points even make it into the conversation. But let's chop it up. Let's address this first contradiction people have with renting, and they're talking about flexibility. You have the flexibility of picking up a lease, ending a lease, and going on about your business with no tie downs to a property. You just pick up and go. You move. And that's fine, especially when you are younger. When we're younger, that's what we need. We don't know if we're going to be in this one place and this is going to be our dream spot, or if we're going to stay in our hometowns, whatever the case may be. You might just want to move about, and that's the time to do it when you are young. However, when you start talking about 18 to 24, and in some cases $30,000 a year for that flexibility, because that's what you're going to be paying if you're paying $1,500 per month to $2,000 per month. That's 18 to $24,000 every year. And you're being in these apartments. And if you're going to be in an apartment, if you're going to rent at all, only rent for like 2 to 3 years before you figure it out. You're getting older, and you're sitting here, and you've just given up either $48,000 to $72,000 on that $2,000 rent in those 3 years. 72 grand. Now all of a sudden, that 30-year mortgage don't look so bad because you're not putting that towards any equity. That's $74,000 out of your pocket that just went to somebody else, somebody who owns. And that's the thing that makes this insane to me. I get it, but you have to think at some point in time, you got to set up some roots. And if you're not thinking about that on the offset, you're really shooting your generational wealth goals in the ankles right off the rip before you even get off the starting block. That's a wrap. Now let's talk about that 30% rule. And this is going to be a nasty one because it talks about how much money you actually need to have or be generating so you can afford rent or mortgage. If your living expenses while renting exceeds 30% of your monthly income, you messed up. You messed up. Now, is that going to say that, especially now with these home prices being so ridiculously high, no real way about it? And then again, when we're talking about that down payment, if you haven't had that substantial saving bump yet, where you can at least get into a home, and God willing, you keep your credit in check and you get a nice low interest rate mortgage, you still got to compete with that, 350 to $400,000 price tag of that home. Yeah, it's gonna still be a $2,000 or $3,000 mortgage at that point. But individuals like me, unfortunately, for this younger generation, when I got my house, the average price was like 150,000. It's a three-bedroom house, and I got a really, really low interest rate. My mortgage is way under that thousand. 30% rule. That's with the taxes. I'm not paying what you're paying for a one bedroom apartment in Atlanta. I'm far less than that, actually. And that's with my taxes and insurance. That's one of those things that you got to factor in. Now, if you're not able to do that, if you're not able to stay under that 30% rule, you have to make some concessions because it's just beating you down just off of that right there. If you're spending 45% of your income on just shelter, what are you leaving to save? I don't think this is a good financial prospect for the long term. And if you just keep repeating that cycle by going town to town, city to city, doing the same thing, I just don't see it. Get some stability in your life. Another talking point I hear about home ownership when it comes from renters is, the cost of maintenance. Something breaks, like your refrigerator or your AC system. You know, they always use that. Now, being a person who just replaced an AC system for a house this year, I can tell you 5 years ago, I could have saved myself $5,000. It was well over $12,000. Okay. You got to take out a loan for that if you don't have that kind of cash. And that can be an obstacle. 12 grand for a single AC system. Now, how often is that AC system going to break? It's not going to be every year because, conservatively, you're going to spend $18,000 a year in rent just to make sure your AC is working. And sometimes it's not, especially if you're living in a high rise apartment where you might not have had the actual damage yourself. Plumbing, maintenance, that kind of stuff. That stuff does cost when you own a home, but how often are you going to do that? And if you are doing that, why didn't you get homeowners insurance or a policy or warranty insurance for your home that covers these kind of things? Well, that's what I did. So that $12,000 is not going to be 12 grand. It's going to be a couple of $100 a month until I pay it off. And I will pay it off. It also is building your credit because you have another line of credit. This is what we have to do. You have to start looking at it like that. You're looking at it as a renter as a convenience. I don't have to think about it. Well, the devil's in the details. No, you don't have to think about it. You can argue. You can call up the property management. I need this fixed right now. How much is that saving you? It's not saving you anything. You are losing money every year. That $24,000 that you pay every year in 3 years at a $2,000 a month rent is 72 grand. You could have bought several AC units and refrigerators, and a shed to live in if you need to with that kind of bread. And it's not collecting interest. It's not. So maintenance, yeah, you pay it when it breaks, but if it doesn't break, you just saved yourself 12 grand. Another talking point. I don't have to worry about the fluctuations in the housing market or insurance rates. When you see that on the news. No, you don't. You sure don't. And you also don't have to worry about building any equity. You also don't have to worry about creating generational wealth, which is the fastest way to do that is through home ownership. If you want to stay perpetually poor or constantly working, what about what happens when you can't work anymore or you are too old to work? Is Social Security going to keep you in that apartment? Hopefully, you've saved enough money renting that this doesn't factor into you, but eventually you're gonna have to, stabilize those expenses. Is it cheaper to pay utilities in an apartment where it's typically less square footage than a home, or has prices come down so much with these new units, new AC units, and home, you know, insulation, where you're not spending as much cooling and heating your home. I can tell you my average bill in a 1,600 square foot house is around 150 a month, somewhere out that. But I've got it so that I'm paying as I go. I may spend $80 in the springtime per month for electricity. Um, Water, it's about $50 a month in Georgia. That's water and sewer. If you're not doing that in an apartment, there's a problem. If you're paying any fees associated with that apartment, there's a problem. Now, there are homeowner association fees if you live in those kind of communities. I don't. And fortunately for Georgia residents, a new bill has been passed to keep that aspect in check, because we were starting to see a lot of homeowners associations starting to overstep their bounds, so to speak, and putting these ridiculous fines on people for just doing basic things in their own homes or around their own homes. And those homeowners are being faced with thousands of dollars worth of fines and foreclosures on their own homes because they had a basketball hoop up in their yard. This is crazy. And I fortunately, both bipartisan branches of our government here said this is not going to happen anymore. We're going to curtail what you can do, and hopefully it at least is some change. Now, the whole reason homeowners association fees came up in the first place is because people don't typically do what they're supposed to do, just like they don't do what they're supposed to do in an apartment complex. And your smells or your neighbor's smells, that's because you're sharing a wall. And understand, communal living, that's one thing. I personally did not like my experience renting. It was so bad that the only thing I could think about was saving to get a house, just so I can have a sense of autonomy, and making sure that when I got the house, I didn't have any home association fees, and those were rare at the time because there were few communities that didn't have some type of local tax, government, or homeowner association fee or covenant going on, where you're paying more money just for the opportunity to live in this community. Um, just pick better neighbors if you can, and I've got some good ones, so I'm blessed. Ultimately, it's going to come down to lifestyle, and I can look back and reflect on it myself. When I first got down to Atlanta, this is post Freaknik era, and we talking, whoo, 20, 24, 25 years old, 26, and yeah, you want to be next to where that excitement is at that age. Apartments made sense at that age. I just moved here, had no idea if I was going to stay here or not at that age. But as you get older and you start to look around and you start to see things kind of transpire, you know, I rented for, I guess it was about 10 years total, you know, 10 years of renting in Metro Atlanta. And at some point in time, fortunately for me, there was enough earnings to at least put that down payment down and get out there and make it. And I really didn't have to do the, 20, $30,000, or in some cases $60,000. Some people did to get that fixed rate mortgage. And that's a blessing because as I look back now, got into my home in my 30s, and it made so much more sense now that I'm in my 50s and I don't have the worries that some of my counterparts have. I've got people that don't know what they're going to do. They're housing insecure because not only is the path to home ownership shut off to them because income just ain't where it needs to be and the cost of these houses are so high, they're now cut off from renting because these apartments have high upfront costs as well. When you're talking about having proof of income of over 4 months rent is what they're asking in Atlanta right now. If you got 6 grand a month that you're bringing in, why aren't you owning a house? That's to me is insane. But that's what they're looking for, to rent, just to be in debt, 6 grand, and you're trying to figure it all out. It just doesn't make any sense to me. What it comes down to is just lifestyle. When you're young, you want to go out and party and do all the ings. As my man said, you know, you want to go dancing, biking in the park or whatever. You can do that in the subdivision. But hey, I get it. You're young, you want to move around. Cool. You're gonna be older more than you're gonna be younger. At least that's the hope. And if you plan on having any kids, it would be nice. And like I got my two on the back wall right there. It probably would be a good idea to start building something for them so they don't have to make these decisions without some financial backing. Let me know what you think. I'll talk to you later.